Welcome to Private Banking Strategies Podcast with Vance Lowe and Seth Hicks, your secret weapon to protect your assets and never have to start over financially again. Vance and Seth help high net worth individuals, families, business owners, and investors structure an asset-protected, tax-free fortress for their families. Learn how to keep what you earn and use the velocity of money to create your own private banking system. Join us on this journey as we explore the secret strategies of the rich and political elite and help you take total control of your financial security. Now, on to the show.
Hello and welcome to a special edition of Private Banking Strategies with Seth Hicks. You'll notice I didn't say Vance, and here's a reason. Seth was a guest on another podcast, and we're including it in this lineup so you guys can hear that. Seth was a guest on Financial Freedom for Physicians with Dr. Christopher Liu. Seth, how are you?
Doing great, Eric. Thank you.
Yeah, I have not had a chance to listen to this podcast yet, so I'm very excited to get into this. You were a guest on his podcast. What did you guys talk about?
Well, Dr. Liu is an influencer among physicians and MDs who are generally high net worth, entrepreneurial-minded people. So I helped them analyze how to store their wealth in private asset-protected vaults, how to put their debt to work, and the importance of financial privacy in private banking. We touched on topics of how to manage wealth and how to mitigate their tax risk, and all the things that we discuss in traditional private banking strategies, 7-pillar content.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I appreciate it. And without further ado, we'll let the audience hear this podcast.
Awesome.
We work hard as physicians to take care of the health and well-being of our patients. But when it comes to our money, do we have the same condition of care? Probably not. Let's change that together. Welcome to the Financial Freedom for Physicians podcast, where we'll fight and advocate for your financial literacy. As always, I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Liu. Thanks for being here. Let's jump into the show. Hey guys, I want to welcome you guys to the Financial Freedom for Physicians podcast. We've got a great episode this week. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button as well as the notifications bell, and be sure to like, comment, and share if you like this episode. And we'll get into this week's sponsor and show. This week's episode is sponsored by CityVest. CityVest has quickly become the most popular and best way for doctors to invest in top-performing real estate private equity funds that are usually reserved for institutional investors. This unique access to investing in these institutional funds is available for the first time ever through CityVest's easy and secure online investment platform. CityVest does the hard work of conducting due diligence and vetting the investments. They even get a third-party due diligence report that is posted on their website. As a result of aggregating a several million-dollar investment amount into their access funds, CityVest gains access to investing in the institutional investment and is able to negotiate better investment terms such as a 12% preferred return. You can check them out at cityvest.com or go to the link in the show notes below. Now on to the show. All right, everybody. So welcome to this week's podcast episode for the Financial Freedom for Physicians podcast. And I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Liu. And my mission is to empower physicians and other high-income professionals to achieve financial independence and financial freedom early on so that they have autonomy in their lives, their careers, their families. And so I'm always out scouting, looking for the best talent and the best ideas and trying to source it and bring it to you guys. So today we're with Seth Hicks, Esquire, and Vance Lowe of Private Banking Strategies, who are both wizards when it comes to growing wealth. They're here to educate us on how to launch an entirely different realm of wealth without working harder. The team at Private Banking Strategies have established themselves as leaders in the industry, bringing over 100 years of collective experience in helping people achieve and keep financial freedom through private banking. And they've helped countless businesses, families, and individuals achieve things they never thought possible. So today, Seth is going to talk all about private banking, what it is, the strategies. So Seth, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Lou. Really, really glad to be here and really glad to speak to your audience.
Yeah. I know we were in the backstage, we were talking and, we were talking about your background and what you're doing. So, and it's very fascinating because, a lot of physicians, my clients, my followers, they really don't know what private banking is. So give us your background and tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you're about and go from there.
Sure. I went to law school at Pepperdine Law, and when I graduated, I went into a large firm in Dallas called Winstead and worked in commercial real estate transactions. After doing that for a number of years, I wanted a little bit more diversity and I kind of missed the beach back in Malibu. So I went back to LA and I started a business boutique firm with three other senior gentlemen. And we kind of created a niche practice that catered to real estate and business entrepreneurs. And I had exposure to the commercial transaction side of things that I was doing at Winstead, putting together real estate transactions, but also got the opportunity to litigate trials and do some trial work. And what that really focused me in on is how to protect a client's assets and how to structure transactions and mitigate risk in a way that served them best. But the real epiphany came when I met my friend and partner, Vance Lowe, and discovered private banking strategies. And he had been a protege of a man named Nelson Nash, who brought the infinite banking concept back into our culture in the 70s and 80s. And Nelson Nash is known kind of as the godfather of infinite banking. And what that really focuses on is high cash value life insurance contracts, which are utilized as a banking tool, whereby one always gets the money back that they're putting out in investments, and they use their own private bank like a third-party bank would be used for financing, for expansion. But where I brought a new light bulb into this strategy is in the asset protection side of it. And what I mean by that is in many states, you've got the legislature who created laws at post-Civil War to protect their citizens from northern carpetbaggers. And the statutes on the books in southern states like Florida and Texas and many others like it is such that these life insurance contracts are exempt from liability, exempt from creditors. And that comes in really, really favorable and is a great benefit to many of our doctor clients who may be practicing in a high exposure, high liability type area. And you keep high cash value in normal bank accounts, and it's subject to being taken. And we like to say we help clients keep what they make. So that's kind of a general background, and I can dig in further as the other benefits and features. But one of the key fundamental principles is asset protection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so important, especially for physicians, high income earners. We spend a lot of time. We generate a lot of revenue, but a lot of us, we don't know how to keep it. So a lot of it's like expenses, liabilities, taxes, inflation, and also asset protection, divorce, lawsuits. So tell us a little bit about, some of the features of your company and how it's different than traditional other vehicles.
Private banking strategies focuses on 7 pillars. We call it the 7 pillars of private banking strategies. Mm-hmm. And the first is asset protection, like I mentioned. And many of our doctors, that's their primary motivation and reason for utilizing private banking strategies when they come in. But when you start to drill down further, they understand that everything that's in your policy, it grows and compounds tax-free. And it works as a retirement plan as well for you to be able to peel out distributions in latter years or from whenever you want to retire without any tax event whatsoever. Another aspect of things is in this changing culture that we're seeing around us. Banking is changing, and the ability to control your funds and liquidity are changing as well. We've had clients that are banking with big box banks like Wells Fargo, Bank of America, or Chase, and they have a wire come in that's larger than normal for their routine balances, and the bank doesn't release their money. And they have to go through KYC and sourcing processes. And sometimes, it may take months. Whereas the banking of cash into your private bank, you have complete liquidity. It's effectively how much money do you want and where do you want us to send it? And it's there by wire. So you've got financial privacy with private banking strategies where the life insurance companies, they're not subject to the Dodd-Frank Act, and they're not subject to centralized banking laws whereby a client is really not represented by the bank. The bank is acting as an agent of the government. And whereas the life insurance company, things are financially private, the relationship is a matter of private contract, and it is completely protected by statute in many states. And let me just mention now, anyone who's listening that wants to kind of do a deeper dive into your particular state, at the end of the podcast, we'll give you some contact email that you could email me, and I can give you a 50-state worksheet that tells you what your state provides protection for and doesn't, if that would be of value.
Yeah, absolutely. I know some of the listeners, like, for example, just explain what KYC, Frank Dodd Act, just brief so that, they can be well-versed in these types of terms.
Sure. KYC is Know Your Client. It's an acronym that stands for Know Your Client. So the big box banks like Wells Fargo and Bank of America, like I mentioned, they're bound by these regulations where they dig into who you are, what your business is, why you want $5,000 cash if you try to withdraw money, and why they raise their hand, and they have reports, and they'll anything that they think is suspicious, they will report to government entities. The KYC process has kind of become blown out of proportion, in my opinion, whereby your bank is not your trusted agent and advisor. They're more of an enemy. And, and like I said, I've had number of clients that have sold a large piece of real estate, and they have incoming funds, or perhaps this is a big one, with cryptocurrency liquidation. And with cryptocurrency liquidation, banks tend to lock up funds, and I've seen them close clients' accounts for large wires coming in. I've seen them say, we're not handling any cryptocurrency funds. And there are established channels like Coinbase that are fully American gateways to buy and sell cryptocurrency. Yet these banks don't want to participate there. This is a way to effectively, have a private transaction, a private contract that is fully protected and private, tax-free, and is one where you're not going to lose the money that you might have in an account. Now, we also mentioned Dodd-Frank Act. The Dodd-Frank Act was passed in response to the prior bill in 2007, 2008, where there were large financial institutions that became insolvent with the mortgage crisis. There were a lot of bad loans made on real estate to folks who really couldn't afford the real estate. And then this massive foreclosure bubble and wave came upon the banks, and some became insolvent. And so what happened was a bail-in, meaning they took taxpayer dollars and they bailed out private corporations to make them solvent. And obviously taxpayers were not okay with that and raised, stink and awareness about it. And so in response, they passed what's called the Dodd-Frank Consumer Protection Act, but it does anything but protect consumers. What it effectively does is it takes your deposits that you make into Wells Fargo or Bank of America or Chase, and it becomes the bank's funds. And your statement is really an IOU. And in the event that Wells Fargo becomes insolvent, or there's a bank run, or hyperinflation occurs and people try to take all their cash out and they become insolvent, or there's another mortgage crisis from bad loans, the money that you've deposited is effectively their money. And they're going to offer you pennies on the dollar or perhaps stock in the company in an exchange of value for whatever cash you had deposited. Now, I don't want that. You don't want that. And none of our audience wants that. But people, and when I first started digging into this, I thought this is simply un-American. It's unconstitutional. But when you dig into this, you'll find that that is absolutely the conclusion, and that it's really easy to protect yourself from a bail-in. Now, what it's called now is a bail-in, and audience and listeners can Google that. What is a bail-in? And you'll go down a rabbit hole that will take you into places like Cyprus, where depositors' money was taken in 2012, 2013, when banks became insolvent there. You go, well, that doesn't have anything to do with us here across the pond. But it does, because Dodd-Frank was passed. And all of the European Union also has bail-in laws in their centralized banks. So that's the risk that most people are not aware of, especially high net worth folks, Dr. Lou, where they just aren't aware that keeping $5 million in Wells Fargo is a huge risk that you don't have to take.
Yeah. And you've pointed out so many things with so many of the geopolitical events happening, with the Canadian truckers, and then the government shutting down the bank accounts for the people that sent them aid, and with the United States sanctioning Russia and essentially crumbling the ruble. And to the audience, these things are very important. Privacy, and you don't want to keep too much money in the bank, because again, they can confiscate your wealth. They can freeze your access. So, your money in the bank is not your money. So these are very important. So my next question is, what's really interesting is private banking is so important today. We need to have privacy, secrecy. We need to be able to do our things and have access. So do these strategies deal with physical assets, or is it just strictly paper and digital assets?
Do you see yourself in that story? Do you feel like you are generating a lot of revenue but are not moving forward as fast as you would like? Are you ready for help? Please call Private Banking Strategies at 817-200-4777 or visit us at www.privatebankingstrategies.com.
What we're talking about, you pay fiat currency, cash, in for premiums, and that has a cash value in your policy. And there's an annual ability to put more cash into your policies in effect until you die. And that is one of the things this is a banking strategy whereby you're taking a banking equation back into your own life. I like to create a picture for folks. Think of it like you're a private vault. And in your private vault, you have the ability to access your funds, you have the ability to use your funds, but yet it's like a bulletproof vault where it's in private and asset protected, it's tax-free. When you take money out or you put money in, there is no tax event, and that is pursuant to Internal Revenue Code 7702. And so if the audience wants to look up IRC 7702, you can see that within the context of a whole life insurance policy, the ins and outs of your cash will not have any taxable event. And so that means if you've stored up, let's say $5 million in cash value, and you're at retirement age and you want to start taking distributions every month, those distributions, unlike an IRA and unlike other types of government-sponsored plans, are totally tax-free. And they're tax-free in and they're tax-free out. When that light bulb goes on, people recognize there's really no reason to put money into government-sponsored retirement accounts, 401ks, IRAs, because in the long run, the tax-free growth far outweighs and outperforms those other taxable structures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so then basically there's no need to use these traditional ways, because it's just so much more favorable to use these private banking strategies.
Yeah, and we've got spreadsheets where we compare like one into an IRA or a 401k, and then one into a high cash value private banking policy, and look at the performance at time. And whether you pay tax now or later, the government's going to get their tax on what you've got in their sponsored program and structure. And think about this, with the printing of money that's been going on in the last decade, 2 decades, we're over $30 trillion in debt. Now, 2 years ago, that was 26. So $4 trillion in just a short amount of time. You can see the parabolic printing of money. And what effect will that have is that I believe that it will directly impact taxation. And you're going to see increased taxation on people who have the wealth.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't tax the poor when they don't have anything. So the rich are going to bear the burden, and their children are going to bear the burden. The estate tax issues, which occur from high net worth individuals when they transfer wealth from generation to generation, the government likes to swoop in and take their share of that. Whereas with private banking, there's no tax burden at all when you transfer from one generation to the next. It's a tax-free transfer to the heirs. So the death benefit that comes when grandpa dies and there's $10 million in death benefit that flows to his son or to his grandchildren, there's no taxable event there. Versus paying, if you have a high enough net worth, paying 50% of that. And I like to tell a story which most people understand and is easily verifiable. And that's with regards to the artist, formerly known as Prince. Do you know who he is?
Yeah, he is a very famous rock star singer, I think in the 80s or 90s. I believe he died of an overdose, but go ahead. I'll let you the example. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a famous, pop rock star, and he died of some type of pharmaceutical overdose. Exactly. It might have been fentanyl. I don't quite recall. But what I do recall is that when he died, he had amassed about $200 million in total estate value. And he had no private banking in place. He had no other structures to help alleviate the tax burden. The state of Minnesota and the federal government took over $100 million from his heirs and beneficiaries of his estate. And they were left with less than half. Wow. Whereas if that money would have been structured properly, they wouldn't have lost a dollar or a penny. And I bet your listeners feel like I do. When we've made money, we want to pay as little tax as legally possible. And we want to keep what we make, whether it's where I get to use it or whether it's my heirs and beneficiaries get to use it. I don't want to sponsor government taxation. Do you?
No, especially when we had to bail out the big banks from 2008, and then also from the coronavirus pandemic, when the government just printed out trillions and trillions of stimulus and caused this massive inflation that we're seeing. And I'm all for paying your fair share, but if it's being wasted and being misspent, let's it's in your best interest to keep your pay as little taxes as possible.
Absolutely. There was, and in the presidential debates between Trump and Hillary Clinton, many may remember, she pointed out that, well, he doesn't even pay taxes. And his answer was, I'm smart.
Yeah.
I'm smart. I take advantage of the laws that are available to me, and I utilize those laws to the best of my abilities, and that's why he doesn't pay taxes. And people like John F. Kennedy, Walt Disney, you name it. I mean, Ray Kroc from the McDonald's franchise, all have utilized private banking strategies, owner of J.C. Penney's. I mean, and the list goes on from famous presidents and wealthy politicians. Even now, they utilize this strategy because it has such tremendous value, and especially with regards to asset protection and tax freedom and financial privacy. That's why they use it.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because if you look at, for example, like individuals such as Jeff Bezos, and their portion of the taxes that they pay relative to their wealth is much less. And that's because they understand the tax laws, and a lot of these CEOs and billionaires, they take very little earned income, and they take a lot of their income from equity and stock. So, if you understand these types of strategies, you can really increase your wealth and pay less. Such a fascinating conversation. I know a lot of people are interested in contacting you or finding more about you. So how can they do that?
Our website is privatebankingstrategies.com. So private banking and then strategies, plural, IES.com. And on that website, we've got a book that we make available to folks who want to learn more about us. And you simply can access the book via audio or written book, your choice. If some like to read and some like to listen, but it's available to you right there on the website. And then we also have numerous blog articles, and we have podcasts that we've produced that dive into various aspects of the pillars, how it works, how you operate your bank. And people oftentimes, when this starts to resonate with them, they begin to binge on the content. So that's all right there on the website at www.privatebankingstrategies.com. But if you have an interest in learning about your particular state, and like I said, Texas, Florida, and most of the southern states have an absolute asset protected vault for private banking, private family banking. But if you want to learn more about your particular state, email us at info@privatebankingstrategies.com. That's info@privatebankingstrategies.com. And then we'll send you a 50-state worksheet where you can look at your particular state. I'm sure your audience is growing and is expanding beyond state borders of Texas. But the good news is that all of our Texas and Southern listeners have absolute asset protection in these private banks.
Awesome. And for the listeners on the show, all of Seth's resources will be listed in the show notes. Seth, any final parting words of wisdom before we call it a day?
Yeah, I would absolutely drill down into this concept if you've never heard of it, and take a look at some of the resources which we've developed over years, especially those folks who are, you're operating in your craft, you're doing what you went to school to do. And we have a number of high net worth doctor clientele, which they run in their lane, but they're looking for strategies to diversify. They're looking for exit strategies so that they don't practice medicine their entire life. They want to get into franchises. They want to get into investment real estate. They want to do oil and gas. And there's just various other ways to diversify their portfolio and have passive income streams. And they can do it all through their private bank. They don't have to go out and find financing through third parties. We create these structures for them, and it works really well when you can put all these pieces together and the light bulb comes on. That's why we made those resources available for folks.
Oh, awesome. So thanks so much for a fantastic conversation. I know the listeners will get a lot of value out of it, and we hope forward to having you again as a guest on the podcast.
My pleasure. Anytime.
What a fantastic show. I hope you enjoyed our very special guest. Just remember, as a shout out to our this week's sponsor, cityvest.com. Cityvest gives you access to the best real estate private equity funds with enhanced investment terms, verified due diligence, and lower risk. You can check them out at cityvest.com or click on the link in the show notes below to hear about their upcoming investment offerings. I'm excited that you made it for another episode. You are truly the best. If you've been following the show for a while, you know that my passion is to bring you the education you need to find your path to financial freedom. Please come back week after week for new content, new resources, and great guests. Until then, if you haven't already, please be sure to check out the website, www.drchrislewmd-PhD.com for more support. I'll see you next week.
All right, Seth, that was fantastic. I am so excited that you got that opportunity. And Dr. Christopher Liu, wow. That is a great podcast. I know that this is not a normal thing that we do for the listeners. It's usually you and Vance covering everything about private banking strategies, but it's nice to bring in these special editions every once in a while so the audience gets to hear that you're going out making these connections and speaking with people that are pretty doggone smart, like yourself. If the listener is saying, hey, my brother-in-law is a doctor, or I'm a doctor and I've never heard of this, or I didn't know that was a possibility, I'd love to talk to you guys about this. Let's give them some contact information.
Sure. You can reach us at privatebankingstrategies.com. It's privatebankingstrategies.com. And you can find all sorts of resources, including all the podcasts that we've produced, our guest pod. We've got a lot of blogs on there that address various topics. We've got a red pill book that's to our guests, either in audio or written form. And I've also got just a ton of valuable information that folks can binge on.
Yeah. Absolutely. Been to the website. You know that. We've talked about this before. You guys have so much stuff. It can be overwhelming, but you guys are also there to answer questions. So I appreciate that. Seth, thank you so much for introducing me to this new podcast. I'm interested to hear other things. I'm not even a doctor, and I really enjoyed that. I'm not even close to a doctor. My parents would love it, but no, I'm good. Anyway, Seth, thank you so much for your time. And of course, our last thank you always goes to you, the listening audience. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to the Private Banking Strategies podcast with Vance Lowe and Seth Hicks. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Vance and Seth come out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it really easy to share these podcasts with your friends and family. And I'm going to humbly ask that you like the podcast, rate it, and leave a review, as this actually helps other people find the show. Again, thank you so much for listening today. For everyone at Private Banking Strategies, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Did that story feel like it was about you? Do you feel you should be making more progress toward your financial goals? Do you feel stuck? Let us help you get unstuck. Are you ready to take action and get your own private bank? Please call Private Banking Strategies at 817-200-4777 or visit us at www.privatebankingstrategies.com.
Thank you for listening to the Private Banking Strategies podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Private Banking Strategies. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.